Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles, Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Sencast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. Each week we talk about a different topic within the world of SEND to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools and to empower parents. In this episode, we discussed working effectively with TAs, and this was discussed with this week's guest, Sara Alston, a SEND and safeguarding consultant and trainer. And Sara has 38 years' experience as a teacher, school leader, Senko, and now as an independent consultant. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and we help to show those small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit both students from birth all the way through to 25, with our Steps for Life framework at that top end, looking at functional academic skills, employability and life skills. But at the other end, for the most complex learners, our informal framework, the engagement steps, really helps to build a profile of the student's needs and show the progress they are making. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me and take you through our assessment software. But for now, let's get on with that podcast. My guest this week is Sara Alston, a SEND and safeguarding consultant and trainer. Sara has 39 years experience, apparently it's gone up a year, as a teacher, school leader, Senko, and now an independent consultant. And Sara is the co-author of The Inclusive Classroom, A New Approach to Differentiation, and author of Working Effectively with Your TA. Probably a good person to get on and talk about working with TAs. She also writes for a variety of magazines. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
You are very, very welcome. It is important to get that partnership between teachers and the teaching assistants right. And when it works well, it can transform the classroom, especially for pupils with SEND.
I think for all pupils. When you get it right, and it's one of the things that's really, as part of writing the book, I did a lot of surveying of teachers and TAs about what they felt about their role. And the phrase that came up again and again from teachers was that the TA's worth their weight in gold. And the real value teachers see for TAs, but yet we've got a role that is really insecure. We have politicians who historically have completely disrespected the role of TAs. We're gone from the mum's army, Kenny Badenoch, who referred to TAs as surplus staff. There is a real, we had the MITRE project, the Maximising the Impact of Teaching Assistance project, which has done some excellent research, but actually produced the headlines that TAs hindered children and learning and development. And part of this whole is about the understanding of the role of the TA. I mean, I am in the odd position of having written a book called Working Effectively with Your Teaching Assistant. For preference, I would not use the job title teaching assistant. I used it because that's what Ofsted and the guidance says. I would much prefer to talk about learning support assistants, because their role is to support learning, not to assist the teacher. A paraprofessional and you had a growth in paraprofessionals in all sorts of areas, not a PA to the teacher.
Now, one thing I find interesting is, obviously, when I was at school back in the day, there were no real TAs, they weren't there.
It's a role that's developed entirely by stealth, and this is one of the things I find fascinating. Certainly when I first started teaching 39 years ago, there weren't no TAs. There were a couple of there was in the first school I taught in an auxiliary, she was called, Mrs. Cutting. And Mrs. Cutting was in charge fundamentally of liquids. The head's tea and coffee, blood, vomit, urine, and tidying the library. I think there were less liquids involved in tidying.
I hope one of them mixed.
Yeah. But fundamentally, she would never gone anywhere near learning. Nobody would have expected her to go near learning. And there were a number of parents who came in and helped with reading, art, trips, etc. And that was... But then we have two big things that have happened to increase the TA workforce, neither of which are directly related to TAs. Firstly, we had the Warnock report and looking at SEN and inclusion and bringing children with special needs into the mainstream schools.
Yep.
And so those children needed more support. We then had the agenda about teacher workload and the agenda about attainment. And so the teacher workload led to the workforce agreement with those 27 areas which people may remember of admin tasks that teachers were to do. So I remember when I first started teaching, if I wanted to do a school trip, I had to work it all out, to find the place, I had to book the coaches, I had to work out the money, I had to collect the money, I had to do the accounts, everything. As a newly qualified teacher, that really blew my mind. Well, a probationary teacher I was in those days, a long time ago. But those kind of jobs have moved to other support staff. And that whole agenda about attainment, the national curriculum, the introduction of Ofsted, all those things led to a huge increase in the support staff in school, both within and outside of the classroom.
That's quite amazing because, the role has increased hugely to need a TA, but then actually that booking, that's done what someone has said, actually is an even bigger role. And what I find really interesting is, I don't know how many years ago, but in Scotland, all classroom assistants were made redundant overnight. And there are no general classroom assistants in Scotland at all. There are only learning support assistants when specified for SEN.
And one of the things that's fascinating, when I was researching the book, I found 18 different job titles for staff, support staff. My thing was support staff working in classrooms. 18 different titles used in English schools.
Wow.
I mean, which I think I'm just trying to remember. Yes, a consequence gatekeeper. There were behaviour support assistant, bilingual support assistant. I mean, it's just an amazing range of. But what we need to look at is this group as this is what this group need the support and need to be valued, because we now have I should remember the figure, and I never do because I don't remember figures, but getting on for 20% of our staff in schools are TAs, teaching assistants. It's a huge quantity of school budgets.
Yep.
It's a really role that's really valued by teachers, by parents, by children.
Yes.
It is the government policy is fundamentally not to have a policy. If you take the government guidance on the use of TAs, it fits onto a single PowerPoint slide, point 22.
22 size fonts. It's not very big. There's not much there, Gab.
It's very, very little. But it has, and what there is all a what and not a how. Teachers are still responsible for the progress and development of the pupils. The TA is to supplement, not replace the teacher. They should work effectively together. That's, nice bit of information. And, that basically, if your child is, wherever the child is, the teacher's responsible, and there is a recognition, grudgingly, that TAs may play a key role. But there's nothing on how do you make that relationship work
I don't blame them, because I think in so many schools how that works is completely different. There are probably some fundamental rules in there, but how that would look in terms of someone ticking boxes is probably completely different.
But one of the things it means is there is a reliance on the relationship between the teacher and the TA, particularly in primary, where it's very strong, and they maybe spend a lot of time together. One of my respondents said they actually thought they spent more time with their TA than their husband. But schools are depending on that relationship, and often depending on that friendship, in order to make it work.
Yes.
They're not giving liaison time. They're not giving the respect to the TAs, and they're depending on goodwill on both sides for them to work together. So TAs, often their hours are no more than the same hours as the children. So if TAs only work their hours, they come in with the children, they go out with the children.
Yep.
A lot of them do not get paid lunch breaks unless they're on duty.
Yep.
So the liaison between the teacher and the TA is very often happening in their own time.
Yeah.
And when you consider that a lot of TAs are earning more than minimum wage, but not much,
No.
to ask them then to work additional hours or to do work at home is not a reasonable or fair expectation.
No.
And this is one of the reasons why we have a real issue of recruitment of TAs. Because actually, a lot of people will go and work in supermarkets or coffee shops because they'll get paid more. And particularly working from home, the reasons that some of the TAs have gone into being a TA because it works with school holidays has actually changed.
It's interesting. The government begrudgingly said they are key, kind of, in probably tiny print.
Yes.
But it's that relationship between the teacher and the TA, and the TA and the children, because TAs generally love, and the children love them, and it is great. But it's kind of like that; those two bits are used to kind of keep them in school. You don't need to pay them because they love it. It's like, but you're not valuing them.
It's that thing of, you hear it less now, but it comes up now and again. Well, teachers shouldn't expect more pay because it's a vocation. And TAs, they love it. The other thing you get is it feeds into the mum's army.
Yep.
That you have people doing this to supplement the family income rather than to provide the family income.
Yes.
And actually, this is about my really strong belief that one of the reasons teachers and assistants are not used effectively as they should be is because of the working conditions that are forced on them, both by schools but by government policy.
Yep.
And we need to say these are paraprofessionals. If you deal with a legal firm, solicitors, you want to be dealing with the paraprofessional because it's a lot cheaper than the solicitor. But the point's when you want the solicitor because you want that legal expertise.
Yes.
You go into hospital, a lot of your care will be from a nursing assistant or care assistant. They're paraprofessionals. But you want the nurse and you want the doctor. If you go for social work, a lot of the work is done by family support assistants. Family support workers, who are, again, they're paraprofessionals. Those people are given a respect that we do not give our TAs.
But in all of those roles, you need that relationship and structure around all of that so it works. And I bet you if you actually kind of drill down into all of those roles, there is time for that relationship, there's time for that. Whereas to save money, nope, we just pay them for when they're in, while they're working with the kids. We won't have extra time. Actually, we can really value them. And some schools do. I know some schools do that, but overall, that's not everywhere.
And there's a whole issue of appraisal.
Yes.
I don't know whether we want to get into this now or save it for a bit later.
While we're here, let's get into it now.
Okay. Appraisal, that TAs do not have to have any form of appraisal or line management. Now, we all have mixed feelings about appraisal meetings. I know they're not necessarily everybody's favourite way of spending their time, and the paperwork really can be quite onerous. But at the same time, they're a way of actually checking in that what we're doing is valued, that we're doing it right, of identifying what support we need to do it better. And actually, for teaching assistants, if they do not have that, it's about how do we respect and value what they do. It is not, and so I think one of the things that we're working effectively with your TA, and it needs to be done, so needs to be a change at school level, and often I suspect at trust level now, is for clear line management, ideally not by involving the class teacher because they work with them, but because there's a blurred line about professional and personal in that relationship, it needs to be held and led by somebody else within the school as a senior leader, because that's recognising the role. And I think you need to have at least determinedly appraisal line management with clear targets. For me, a target about reflecting the school development plan, a target reflecting the work with a child, or better, a group or class of children they're working with, and something about their personal development.
And just to be clear on that second one, that group, it's not about attainment, it's not about progress. That's not the sort of thing we're doing here. And that's one of the things
it's about, and that it's about how do what are you wanting to see, and a lot of that may be about engagement, maybe about social development. It might be about attainment. And one of the things I would say, when I worked many years ago now in a school where I had the opportunity to 3 schools amalgamated, and we had the opportunity to completely review the teaching assistants, our learning support assistants, we then called them, because we inherited a workforce on completely different contracts, pay scales, God knows what. It was chaos. All the contracts got to be redone. And we introduced the appraisal system for the TAs. First, there was a lot of, and it was not popular, and I was not the most popular person in the building. Within 2 years, it was absolutely valued, and there was a 25% improvement in LSA attendance in school, because they knew they were valued, they could see the impact they were having on the children.
And that's one of the things when you talked about they could work in the school or they could work in similar money in Tesco's. Around Tesco's you will have, or any other supermarket, other supermarkets are available, you will have all of those processes and procedures. You will have appraisals, you will hopefully feel valued, you'll have all of those things, probably much more, but when you're a teacher's assistant, that phrase is it's a not nice phrase. I don't mean that if anyone's called a TA, I'm not saying anything about you, but it's kind of, you're just there to help, which makes it sound like a mum's army. Whereas when you're a learning support assistant and you have appraisals and you have where do you want to be next, how can we help you to succeed, and you're doing training, now that is, as you said, as a paraprofessional, it is actually someone who is contributing, contributing, they're valued, and they're adding value back in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the whole thing of why we need to say learning support, is in my view. But I don't. Do you know what? It's another one. It doesn't. It's about recognition and support, and it's got the title that works for the school and the individuals.
Yes.
And actually, if they've been called TAs since the beginning of time,
yeah,
TAs may be the place you want to.
It's that term everyone gets.
Yeah.
One of the interesting is Helen Bray, who's been on the podcast. She invited me a number of years ago to her Learning Support Assistants Conference. So as a trust, all the schools get together and the Senkos have a conference, and they did the same for all the Learning Support Assistants.
Brilliant.
And it was full. It sounds belittling when I say it. It's the same as everyone else got. They had the keynotes in the morning, they had the big talks, the CEO from the trust was there. That's how valued they were. And afternoon keynotes. It was so good.
I get so frustrated because one of the other big issues with our TAs is about training. So often they don't They don't attend all the inset days. When they do, very often they have a separate programme. Often that separate programme consists of tidying up.
Yep.
But actually, or even when they get the training, there are sort of two, that it reflects statutory, so it's first aid and safeguarding.
Yep.
Or it's work with a particular intervention or particular group. So we have, we have amazing TAs with some phenomenal expertise. But we also have a lot of TAs who are learning it on the wing. They are being trained in the classroom. They go in with very little classroom experience beyond having been in a classroom or having children who've been in a classroom or both. And they may have been developed an expertise on autism, but it's a very rookie thing often because it's based on the experience of particular children.
Yes.
Or a particular course. What they don't have is actual understanding of what is learning because nobody's taken the time to tell them. And I'm amazed how responsive TAs are when you do get them at that kind of conference, even school, to actually understand, okay, so that's what learning looks like. And too often, one of the problems is we've got people who are not trained, not supported. And we really need to, it's about valuing our teaching assistants. It's also, it's about investing in our workforce.
Yes.
And we need to invest in our workforce to make them the most effective they can be.
Yes.
And, we need for teaching assistants to be valued. They need time, they need training, they need recognition.
That's the thing, where schools are limited on that budget,
Yeah.
making them feel valued, giving them responsibility, giving them training, making them the best version of themselves type thing. That is how you can but also TA is a route into being a teacher as well. So it's how can you celebrate and support that.
And I had amazing learning support assistants who were on the route to teacher training. I also worked with amazing people who that was absolutely not the route they were on.
Yes.
And they were really outstanding practitioners in their field. And, including people who develop real specialism. When I was working as a head of inclusion in a school, I had an application with TA. The head went, really? You came to interview them? I went, yeah. Her background, she was absolutely upfront. She had no classroom experience. But she'd been a croupier in nightclubs. And she said, I'm really good at dealing with people who are emotional and struggling to manage their behaviour. My maths is excellent and my mental math strategies are really good. I think I've got transferable skills I can use. We appointed this woman. She was absolutely right that the skills in managing the emotionally stressed were absent, whether they were gamblers who were losing their money or children who were struggling with behaviour. She was absolutely right. The same approaches worked.
Yeah.
And at different points, she led our TA groups both for maths and for behaviour.
Wow.
But she would never wanted to be a teacher. But
nice.
But by giving her those opportunities to develop and share those skills she'd learnt somewhere else, that was really important.
But I think, again, going back to this TA role, is you kind of have your hierarchy, and you have a teacher, and you have this little person attached to them. That's belittling. They should be a full-on structure. They should have a line manager, that person who is responsible for them, and that should be clearly. They shouldn't be almost like nurses have a matron type thing, and doctors have. It's kind of that two systems alongside.
And the other thing is, because you've got these blowing of the relationship lines, but one of the other things you get with teachers is they're not trained to work with another adult. One of the things that's coming up more and more is about, we've got our SEN numbers approaching 20%, Therefore, logic, 20% of initial teacher training ought to be looking at special needs. It's not. Equally, majority of staff will at some point work with a teaching assistant. There is no specific work in initial teacher training on how to manage an adult, with the result that a lot of teachers come in and try to manage the adult like another child in the room, which does not work well for the relationship. And it can also be particularly for early career teachers, a very, very difficult relationship. You have an experienced older TA, as one of my people I quote in the book said to me, she said, she was 22. She was expected to manage and direct a woman who was the same age as her mother in a classroom that woman had worked in for years. And she wanted to change things. She felt it was like going into her mother's kitchen and reordering the cupboards. Yeah. And this is a difficulty. And there's also many issues where often the TAs are also parents.
Yes.
And that has a whole I remember when I was deploying TAs, and trying to allocate people to classrooms, ending up with this huge sheet of paper with the names of the children, the names of the TAs, and moving Post-its around, trying to work out where everybody could go. Think, yes, I got it. Oh, God, they don't work on a Wednesday. Oh, I got it. No, they're in the same year group as their child. And it really was, a real difficulty.
So again, if I went to work at Tesco's or anywhere, you generally have a nice, clear job description, exactly what you're going to do. Okay, your response is just answer my question then.
I don't. Well, you could. Yeah.
In my head, it was like for that new teacher coming in with that TA, the age of their mum. It would be so lovely to have a job description of these are all the things they're going to do, so you know that this is covered.
One of the things I recommend in the book, actually, and I spent a long time developing because it works, is what I call a classroom contract, which is an agreement between, and again, it requires the school to give time and respect.
Yeah.
The agreement between the TA and the teacher, or TAs and teachers.
Yep.
And particularly important, I think, when there's a job share for either TAs or teachers, because you want the continuity across the week.
Yep.
And it's saying who is responsible for what.
Yeah.
And it's a twofold thing. It's a contract. It's not the TA will do this. It's the teacher will do this and the TA will do this. And one of the things I say, almost the discussion about who's going to do what is more important than getting it all written down. Because you're saying, okay, so-and-so needs to use a laptop. Who is going to be responsible for getting the laptop out and set up so that it's there ready?
Because it's such a useful bit of information. That teacher coming in, who's coming to that brand new school, the TA's been there for 20 odd years, knows it inside out, knows that classroom inside out, probably knows those kids really well.
And knew their mothers.
And they're going to go, right, these are all the stuff I'm going to do. And you're like, well, why are you doing that? Because of this. Oh, okay. And just having that and being able to ask questions of why would help that teacher so much.
And I mean, what I, actually recommend, you do is you work it together. And I also say it needs to be reviewed during the year, because your children who you have in September will not have the same needs in July.
No.
So you may, having worked in a school near a military camp with huge mobility, they may not even be the same children.
No.
But what I say is you need to work out what needs to happen before the lesson. And then you will not be surprised, having written a book, Inclusive Classroom, we've talked about 5 phases of the lesson. I talk about the 5 phases of the lesson and what each person's role is in the 5 phases. And then after the lesson, including how the TA is going to give feedback.
Yeah.
So the part before the lesson includes how do you share planning, because actually one of the big problems for TAs with the lack of time is they come into the lesson and they're learning what's happening in the lesson at the same time as the children.
Yep.
And then they're expected to teach the material, differentiate the material, that they're only learning at the same time.
Yep.
So sharing the planning is absolutely vital. And it is not reasonable to say, it's on the system, they can look it up. Well, when are they doing that? Not reasonable to expect them to do it at home. I mean, a big issue for a lot of TAs was saying, well, I can't access it at home. I'm trying to access an A3 document on a phone.
Yes, because they do not have the equipment. It's not being provided.
So we need to be, I actually take sharing lesson planning down to 3 key questions. Because actually we need something, and I'm not sponsored by Post-its. I promise I'm not sponsored by Post-its. But I would take it down to 3 key questions. What is the learning intention? And being clear, what is the learning intention? Not
what is the activity.
What are we wanting them to learn? What is the key vocabulary the child needs to access that lesson? Because actually, and that often, think about your learning intention. If you're doing poetry, it will be things like verse, stanza, line. If you're doing your learning intentions about what you're writing the poem about, it may reflect that.
Yeah.
What you give it, and what is the outcome? And that is the outcome for that group or that child, not for the whole class.
Yeah.
And that will fit on a Post-it. What I would say is you can then turn the Post-it over and the TA can write their feedback on the back and give it back to the teacher.
Nice.
Remember there are different size Post-its available. I personally love an A5 Post-it. Really recommend. But if we don't share the planning, one of the key roles of a teaching assistant working with a child with special needs is to actually make themselves redundant.
Yes.
We want to develop the child's independence. They don't know if the TA doesn't know what they're doing, they're going to fall back on over-prompting. They're going to fall back on spoon-feeding, which is what the MITRE research showed. If we want teaching assistants to support with visuals and other things, they need to know when to use them.
Yep.
We want them to support vocabulary. We need them to understand the vocabulary. We don't tell them.
No.
I got a visual here. I developed a visual. And they bring it in at the wrong point. They use the vocabulary wrong because they don't know the context. And when they don't understand what the learning is, they don't know which is the admin and which is the learning. We want them the child to focus on the learning because the TA is supporting learning, which may mean the TA is actually going to do the admin. And if we don't understand the learning, we fall back. How do I show the learning? I get the child to complete the task.
Yes.
Regardless of whether they learnt anything, but it's finished, therefore it must be learnt.
And when we talked about, that lesson, you've got the 5 phases of a lesson. You kind of don't want to be doing that outside of that for going through the TA of this is what we're going to be doing today. That you haven't got, no one's got the time for that. So you've kind of got to keep that as kind of you're learning how each other works, but here are the key bits to go alongside. And also you probably want to know if you're going to go into doing the finding the shape of an area, your TA does know all of that before you start.
Yeah, and absolutely you need to know. And I think the other thing that happens when you don't share the planning.
I said, sorry, I'm still saying, finding the shape of an area, I said. Finding the area of a shape. So
I knew it sounded wrong, but I couldn't.
I know, I said, there's something wrong there.
We both knew it was wrong, but we both knew what we meant.
Good. Sorry, everyone.
I still should say I'm going to go for a tangent. Best explanation of the difference between area and perimeter I was ever given was by a child from a Gypsy Roman traveller background. Miss, so what you're saying is the perimeter's how much fencing I need, the area's how much tarmac I need.
Perfect.
And I thought, this is a child who's taken the learning, understood it, and put it in a context that's relevant for them.
That's a really good one, actually.
And I thought that was actually, that's learning. And how do you demonstrate learning? He demonstrated his learning because he could use what I'd taught him.
Yes.
And actually, do you know what? Everybody else could then make sense of it as well.
Yes.
I thought, maybe I'm redundant from that. Anyway, we also need the TAs to support with instructions. If they don't know what the instructions are, they can't support them. And then you end up with the dreadful thing of the stereo teaching. So the teacher says, get your books out. TA says, get your books out. Get your pencils out. Get your pencils out. And you get that. And your child who's struggling to process language, having everything said to them twice, often slightly differently. And
so in that situation, you kind of, in my head, I'm like, either you can do that without being told, and you needing the support somewhere else, or if you're struggling with that, perhaps the way the information's given isn't good. So perhaps, and again, this is where you know that kind of, just so you can have it written down. So when the teacher says that, you can just point to it. Yeah. You go, we're at that stage.
There are lots of ways, but what we need to do is prompting for independence.
Yes.
Not building prompt dependence. And going back to the whole issue of TAs not being clear what their job is, you often get TAs who feel they need to be doing the prompting constantly to show they're doing their job.
Yes.
Because we're circling, I can feel us circling the elephant in the room of the one-to-one. So I get to charge at this elephant.
It is the one-to-one, as I keep seeing, it is seen as the golden ticket. If as a parent you get an EHCP with a one-to-one, it's the golden ticket.
But almost no, I have seen, in my years, I think I've only ever seen 2 EHCPs which specified one-to-one. Both were one was for a child where there was a very significant safeguarding issue, one for a child with very significant physical needs in mainstream school, who in fact had 2 adults to 1 for most of the time, because that was what they needed for their physical support to engage them in a mainstream school. So I think we need to be clear that just because a child has an EHCP, they are not entitled to a one-to-one. The vast, vast, vast majority do not need a one-to-one, and it would be inappropriate to give them one.
Even if they needed a one-to-one right now, the aim is you want to pull that back as soon as possible, because if that child, as you said, that prompting, that mirroring, kind of just repeating, that kind of TA becomes like a circle around that child that no one can get in and that child cannot get out, and that child relies on that TA, which means when that TA isn't there at lunch times, at break times, they can't do anything because they're dependent on that person.
If that person is ill, I can't do anything because Mrs. Brown's not in today. Well, and I call it Velcro and helicopter.
Yes.
Velcro is that one-to-one. And I think it's very rarely appropriate. And even where it is appropriate, you need a team around the child. Because if it is just one person, who is always that one person, that is utterly exhausting for that person. I'm afraid to say often quite dull.
Yep.
And you develop an inappropriate dependency, both for the child on the adult, but often from the adult on the child, which is actually a concern. Why do people like the one-to-one? It's clear the child is being supported.
Yes.
The support is always there if the child needs help. And it makes it easier to differentiate work because you have somebody. But
I do think it has come down to a bit of a tick box. Is the child getting supported? Well, they've got one-on-one TA. Oh, the answer is yes. Then they're getting supported perfectly. No,
and I was going to say the disadvantage is exactly that it stops anybody thinking about the support. What do they need? Mrs. Brown's there.
Yes.
And I apologise to anybody called Mrs. Brown. But Mrs. Brown's there, therefore they have support. It moves the teacher away. It creates a barrier between that child and the teacher. It often creates a barrier between the child and the peers. The number of times I have been into classroom and I can spot the children with special needs standing at the door because the child is sat with an adult between them and their peers, physically being a barrier.
Yep.
Child becomes dependent on the adult. It undermines the child and any of the adults' belief the child can do anything more.
Yes.
Whereas if what I say is we need, I would absolutely promote action. The sort of elements of it is the helicopter support. And so I'm going to list them off in the hope we'll remember to cover them. Helicopter support, building a team around the child, and a key person.
Yes.
So, helicopter support, rather than the TA being sat there all the time, glued to the child, Velcroed, we want the child to develop independence. We want them to know they can and do things on their own, and we want them to be able to actually find what they can and can't do. That you actually learn from failing things, and we need to allow that. We also actually are really short of staff, and we don't want the TA glued to one person. We want them to be able to use them effectively within the room. So helicopter support, they start on the helicopter. They start on the ground with the child, prompted start, get them sorted, check they know what they're doing, lift off, work with other children. 5 minutes and I'll be back. Go and do something else, come back. It may be at first 1 minute and I'll be back. But then you lift off, you touch down, check, refocus, praise, support, give the next instruction. Lift off, go and do something else. Come down, like the helicopter.
But it's about knowing where they need that support. So in an English lesson, what is it they need support with? Is it the organisation of their things on their desk? Do you literally kind of help them get set up and then step back because they can follow the instructions? It's about being ready to learn is where they're struggling.
Do they need to orally rehearse each sentence? So they orally rehearse the sentence, they've counted the words in the sentence, they know how many, they've got a cube for each word in the sentence. They have a post-it with the letter, the first initial sound of each word they're going to write. They then try and write that sentence. They're going to use their computer to. They write their first sentence. They have a go. They come back.
Yes.
TA follows the same process, second sentence. But they're actually, rather than the TA sitting there watching them write their sentence, they give them that independence. And slowly you can build. And it may take a long time. I can think of movement break, year 2 child movement break. And he when he first started movement break, he needed an adult to go with him and to make sure that he took his movement break sensibly and he came back. As the year went on, the TA used to be able to stand at the classroom doorway while he did it. Then he'd learnt that routine, and other staff knew that he might be in this space doing this, but we could trust him, and the TA could do something else. Very simple, pulling back. So I think that is really important.
And one thing someone said, it was on the podcast, and I was like, I never thought of it like this. What is it, one of many things teachers don't like, what is it, as a teacher, you often really hate? Someone else coming in and monitoring your lesson. Yeah?
Often, yes.
It always goes wrong that moment, doesn't it?
Yes.
Everyone gets to see you go wrong. And it was like, if you'd been in the previous lesson, it was perfect.
It was great. Yes, it was lovely. But
no one likes being monitored. No one likes... but if you have that TA sitting next to you, you are permanently being monitored.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can we stop 30 seconds? I just lost my slides.
No. Yes, you'll find your slide. I will waffle about something about TAs. I'll find something to waffle about.
No, I know you're going to have to edit anyway. What on earth has happened? That's just completely vanished. Okay, sorry.
We there?
No.
Getting there. I think with TAs, I do love that phrase about a TA's job is to make themselves redundant. I love that phrase. That idea is, I've come in, they need all of this support, but over this year, I'm going to give them strategies to become independent.
I mean, it's a whole thing. I'm aware that we have done Team Around, We talked about helicopter. I want to do
team around.
We're going to come back to the redundancy and talk about scaffolding.
Okay, yes, cool.
Team around, that importance that we need to share their expertise about children. If we only have one person who can work with that child, we're in a problem.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of proverbial buses out there that will, may take out your staff, may take out whatever. You don't want to lose, if you don't want the child dependent on a single person.
No.
It is not good, it is not. So we need that, but equally the teacher is responsible.
Yes.
So one of those things that's really keen is we're building a team around the child. That means anybody within that room, ideally anybody within that year group, can work with any child. So, for example, the little boy I referred to earlier who had high level of physical needs, it was important that everybody in that year group was trained to meet those physical needs.
But that does require communication. It does require knowledge sharing and all those sorts of things. But it should mean that as you're working with those children, those strategies you're using, everyone should be able to do.
And they are. It's not only key for the support of the child. It's key for making sure we've got continuity. We managing absence, safeguarding. It is absolutely key, and also that the child gets and is entitled to teacher time.
Yes.
When parents say, but I want a one-to-one, my response is, do you want your child to be taught by a TA?
They just feel that, I think, I see it quite a bit, they just feel that if they know, it's that simple tick box, if my child is a TA, everything's going to be fine, and they can stop asking questions. But
actually when you say, it is not, every child is entitled to teacher time. That means that actually there will be points when the teacher and the TA swap.
Yes.
And the teacher needs to be working with that child. Because the TA is to supplement and support, not replace the teacher. And, we need to be clear that may mean that the TA is working with the rest of the class. They are doing the triaging. They're rotating the roles, and the teacher is working with one-to-one or working with a group. And what we do need to be clear is that we do not outsource the education of our most vulnerable pupils to the less qualified person in the room.
Yes.
That it's not morally right.
No. But it's again, we've talked about transitions, but it's that transitioning from year to year, transitioning from school to school, or whatever's next. You want them to be able to work with someone different. You need those skills. And
I have seen both children and staff get really stressed at the point when there's going to be a transition.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons you need to have those range of relationships. Because I've equally seen emotional-based school non-attendance start because they're so used to working with a TA who leaves, is ill, or is simply redeployed.
And as children get older, it's helping them understand what they need.
And
because I can imagine that when you've got a TA who knows that child so well, is doing it all, so there's no kind of need. Is when they go to the next bit, it's like, I need to know what I need.
And one of the big differences I find between primary and secondary for children is in primary, SEN support comes to the child. In secondary, the child often needs to go and find it.
Yeah.
But what I would say is one of the ways to replace, to an extent, the one-to-one is to look at the language which comes from the early years curriculum. And there is so much amazing practice in early years, and we need to go back and look at how do they use staff in early years, where they're making observations, they're working with groups, they're working with individuals. They also the role of the key person.
Yes.
That person, and it could be a TA, it could be a teacher. I have worked in a number of schools where every child in the school has a key person.
Nice.
For some people, that is somebody who works in the office. It may even be the site manager. But everybody has a key person, and that's the person who they have contact with on a daily, weekly, half-timely basis, and that it works really well for parents as well, because that's your first line of call. And that person holds the child in mind. They know that concept of professional love and care.
Yep.
And so that is the person who is your key point. And that is somebody who does, it may be somebody who does a daily check-in. It may be doing, different children will have different needs. But actually, for those parents say, but they need a one-to-one. For those TAs who think they need staff who think their child needs a one-to-one, a key person. That's somebody who holds them in mind, but they may not be the only person who works with them.
And again, hearing that my child needs protecting, it's about protecting their child. And I think sometimes we as parents, we see our child as a tiny little thing and maybe forget that they're growing up. And then at some point, your child surprises you by doing something absolutely amazing, and you suddenly realise how much they've grown. And I think when we think of having that TAs, they're thinking of that younger child who struggled and needs that support. They need someone with them all the time because they can't do this and they can't do this. So you need to give them that opportunity to show you what they can do.
I so often, as a Senko, would have parents coming in a panic. Year 5. My child needs an EHCP. They need I can't imagine my child managing on their own independently at secondary. And you almost always, there's cry in year 5, end of year 4, beginning of year 5, for an EHCP was parental fear of secondary. And actually trying to say, A, we can't future-proof children, but B, allowing for the amount of growing up. And you actually saying to the parent, do you remember when they first came into school? How different they are now. Do you remember when they came into the beginning of year 3, how they are now? From year 3 to now, they've got another 2 years of growing up. Even that growing up between the beginning of the summer term in year 6 and going to secondary school. And we need to, as you say, recognise and promote the independence. And I think I'm going to take the opportunity to segue off to scaffolding. One of the most misused, misunderstood words in entire education. I do remember a lovely TA who came to me, recently appointed, and she said to me, the teacher keeps asking me to do scaffolding. I'm obviously misunderstanding because I haven't seen a single building pole. What on earth does she mean? And I thought, thank you for coming and asking, rather than... But, I think we need to be really clear. Actually, what do we mean by scaffolding? And I would go to the Education Endowment Fund toolkit and their thing about scaffolding, that breaking down of, what we're aiming for is independence. We're aiming for the child to be able to say, what do I need to do this work on my own? And we need, we start with that lowest level of scaffolding, the task completion, the correcting. You've written 2 + 2 makes 5. That's wrong. Write 4. Right answer. Nothing's been learnt apart from the fact if it doesn't matter if I get the answer right or wrong because I get told.
Yep.
To the modelling. Well, let's make this. Let's model it. Let's make it clear. That's the next stage. You're guiding them through, cluing. What do you know?
Yep.
What else can you do? And then that prompting. Go on, you know this. To the point where they can take control of the and it's that key thing. So the child is prompted, what do you need to do next? Not what do you want me to do, but what are you doing? It's talking through that, and we're aiming for that self-talk so the child can have that conversation with themselves.
One thing when people talk about scaffolding, they talk about, when we build a house, we put the scaffolding up to help them. And when we finished, we take the scaffolding away because it's not needed. So the aim of scaffolding is to remove it. And I'm like, that's cool if I'm building a house. But it depends whether or not you see a child as a very, very long road with thousands of houses upon where each one needs scaffolding and then gets taken away. Or you see it as a really tall skyscraper that actually, as we add a floor, yes, that's finished, but we need to put the scaffolding on for the next bit. And when people talk about removing scaffolding, it's like, yeah, for that activity, for that skill, but when we move on to a new one, we'll need scaffolding again.
It's a process.
Yes.
It's not a single action.
No.
We can't go, scaffolding's been done. That intervention is complete, we have scaffolded it. We've scaffolded that intervention. It's a process, and as children become more confident, they will become more able to scaffold on their own. But if we think about, somebody was talking to me about learning to drive and the level of learning to drive. Even as a proficient, test-passed driver, we still need some scaffolding. We're driving somewhere new. A lot of our scaffolding that now comes with this wonderful device called a sat-nav. That scaffolding, the ones that are good ones, will tell us which lane to be in.
Yes.
Sometimes we can do the lanes on our own because we know where they are.
We know how to do it. We know if I'm turning right, I'm going right. If I'm going to hear, but the moment you're in somewhere you don't know, it's a bit of traffic, a bit busy, maybe it's raining. Now I need some scaffolding. Give me some scaffolding. I need to be in the middle lane. Cool. That's the sort of thing. It's an in the moment. It's not a set thing. It's as you see it, you provide it, but it's not the idea of once we've done it, of taking it away. And because the idea is we're going to then help them grow further, and that will need a bit of scaffolding.
And this is why scaffolding becomes this misused, misunderstood term in education. And I think when we're going back to training for TAs, don't tell them to scaffold. Don't tell them to support. Tell them what do you need to do. I mean, I remember going and doing a SEN review in a school and said to the head, you've got a lot of LSAs, that's, they're lucky. What are they doing? They're supporting. Yes, but what are they doing? They're supporting. What are they doing to support the learning? And I realised this man who had, I think, 30 TAs in his school had not a Scooby-Doo what any of them were doing. They were supporting.
And that's one of my questions. When we're talking about kind of working effectively with TAs, to me, there is coming back to that definition of what we're doing, but also actually going through that and kind of going, do we really need that? Is there a better way? There are some TAs who will be taking the photos in the classroom and then they'll spend half a day a week printing them out and sticking them in the book. And you're like, that's costing a lot of money.
Is that what you need to be doing is supporting the children to train them to be able to sit their own photos in. And this is where you get the difference between a learning support assistant and a teaching assistant. These are not an admin person. Their role should be about supporting learning. I absolutely accept there may be some level of classroom admin that you want the TA to do, possibly changing reading books. But I want to see TAs in the classroom working with the children.
And what it should do, it should have an impact on the outcomes of the children. That's the ultimate aim.
Yes.
And there are times where if they're taking something off the teacher, then the teacher can do more. That's going to improve pupil outcomes. And if you think about how much you're paying for some of the admin time and the cost, and it can be done a different way,
go for it, but it's a different way.
Do it the different way, because that way you're then freeing up 2-3 hours a week of that TA's time, which they can use to help someone else be more productive or improve outcomes.
And one of the things, when I have parents say, but they're entitled to this amount of TA support, they're not receiving it. No, because the TA may be working to release the teacher for the teacher to work with your child.
But even that question, it's that again, one of the things I said at the right beginning is to effectively work with your TA, there's got to be some education of the parent around the role of that TA. So when you have that entitled, it's saying to them, look, that's what it says. Ultimately, we want to get them to 0 because that means your child is independent.
And one of the things I think is really important is that conversation and that open, clear conversation with parents either at the point their child joins a school or at the point the child receives a support. That very rarely have I had an EHCP granted that is not, in fact, giving us money for the support we've been giving for years.
Yep.
And actually, they're not suddenly going to change the support because we've had to give the support to prove it works. And actually, because your child needs it. And they're not going to get but we need to be clear. This is what the support looks like. And I would say very much being really clear when children transition between primary and secondary, that support will look like this at primary, and parents get this panic. There isn't any support at secondary. There is the support, but it looks different.
Yeah.
Because actually we're getting into that preparation for adulthood. And, I look round, you go round your average supermarket, you don't see many adults supported by another adult.
No.
And you want your child to be able to be independent. And, it starts, those going all the way back to nursery, where, you have the child who's, parents go, but they can't take their coat off. Well, actually, at some point they're going to need to learn to, But
you might need to let them to struggle for a few times to learn that weird bit you do with your arm, yes, which allows it to come off.
Yes, exactly. And they won't learn that. And actually, we want them to promote their ability to separate from you and to be independent. And actually, it does matter whether they carry their own bag or whether you carry their bag. Whether actually, when parents say, well, what do you need them to be able to do to come into school? They can't write their name. Will they be ready for school? Actually, I would really like them to be able to take their coat on and off. I'd like them to be able to wipe their bum. I'd like them to be able to blow their nose and ideally put their shoes on and off.
Yeah.
My job is to teach them to write their name.
And I'm not going to go into our EHCP debate which is going on at the moment.
Yeah, well.
There's lots of EHCPs happening, but I'd probably guess, and again, the number of children going from school into supported living probably isn't increasing at the same rate of the EHCP. So a lot of the children who have EHCPs will go on to be fully independent in their lives. There may be support, but that's the thing. It's an EHCP where you have a TA. That's not going to be them for the rest of their life. They will, and we want them to be independent.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's scary as a parent, your child growing up.
Especially, it's petrifying. We know it's petrifying. But actually, we need, one of the ways we prepare them to grow up is by making sure the support they get is appropriate.
Yes, and as they get older, it means kind of pulling it back slightly and they're asking for it rather than it always being there.
Because they will need, as they go into adult life, to be able to advocate for their own support.
Yes.
The vast majority of children will be certainly within mainstream, will need to be able to advocate for their own support as they go into the workplace, as they go into further education.
Yeah. And it's as a parent, it's sometimes you do have to step back and let them fail to then to have that conversation about where did it go wrong? Yeah, can you do? What are your options? And it's quite hard, but it's what you need to do as a parent to learn where your child's failing, where they need that support. And then next time you can go, you got this to do, but you might need this bit. And you can find that relationship, but it's an ever-evolving situation with your children. It's not, this is them.
And this is one of the fears we get, and one of the issues with, we're getting into the EHCP debate, where EHCPs are not updated, so they don't represent the child.
Yes.
I think let's leave it at that bit.
Yes, let's leave that bit there.
Because otherwise we could end up talking about that for the rest of the day.
So, let's summarise. So, TAs need to be valued.
Yep.
Maybe not call them TAs.
Yep.
Maybe call them learning support assistants or some other one of your many options you have in your book as an option.
I would still go for my preference, but...
have a defined role, which is clear for easy. There might be a defined role in every different, which is different in every class and every year group.
It's defined, but not set in stone.
Yes, because what that looks like in year 1 and what that looks like in year 6 and year 10 completely different.
And even what looks like in September of year one and July of year one will be very, very different. And I mean, that's one of the things. It's fascinating.
But
watching, I was thinking particularly year one, watching some really outstanding practice, because those practitioners start as early years practitioners at the beginning in September, and by they're doing a very different job by the time those children are moving on to year two.
Definitely. And with that thing, it helps a new teacher coming in, it helps to find those roles, helps what your expectations are. As you said, a teacher coming in hasn't been taught how to manage another adult.
And there's a real issue with teacher training.
So we'll avoid that as a whole topic for today.
But we should put a pin in it and show into that.
Rotating your TAs so they're not linked to one child. And
they are not only so they're not linked with one child, but they also swap with the teacher, so that the teacher works with all their children.
Yes.
And I think that is absolutely vital. The TA should not be
a replacement.
And they should not be the primary educator of the most vulnerable children.
No. But I think, rotating TAs between classrooms, between pupils, between teachers helps in a lot of different ways. Helping parents understand the role of the learning support assistant. Appraisals are really good because they're part of that valuing them.
And it's sort of developing what do they know, what do they need to know, and that training. Actually, we often need to invest money to save money.
Yeah.
And actually investing in TA training so they're really effective may actually require putting some money in, but it will save money, because actually, if you you might actually, if you're using your TAs really well, not need as many.
Yep. Next one is they should have a line manager. That should be there. It should be a structure which they know and understand.
And we shouldn't depend on the relationship between the teacher and the TA to fill in the space where they're not given the time that they need for communication and liaison. And
make full use of them. So don't get them to tidy up on training days. Really value them and give them stuff to do. But also is with all members of staff is if you can do it cheaply in terms of money and hours, doing it a digital way or a different way, look at that, because you have employed that TA, you want to get the most out of them. And I don't mean that in a horrible slave whipping them way.
We need value for money.
We need value for money. But
and it's not value for money if they are sticking things in, stapling things, or gluing.
Yes. And I know people who said, we spent 6 months doing this. And I'm going, but it cost you like 50 quid. But you saw it as we're spending 50 quid where you have all of these hours. And I'm like, those hours cost you thousands.
Yeah.
But, time is money for these people. And you want to make the use of it.
Yeah.
I think that's everything, isn't it?
I think so.
Can
I do another quick plug for the book?
Oh, of course.
Which is Working Effectively with Your TA. Bloomsbury put it as a handbook for primary teachers. It is actually relevant to secondary. It's relevant for Senkos. This is the culmination of years and years of working with TAs. And I think it makes a difference. Give it a go.
And you'll find a link to that book along with her other book, Inclusive Classroom. You'll find links to those in the show notes. So thank you for coming on to the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's always hard to keep it short.
Yeah, we both talk too much.
And as always, you'll find, alongside those links to the book, Sarah's contact details in the show notes, which you'll find, as always, where you listen to the podcast or on the Sencast website. Thank you. If you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics, or anything else. Send us a message via social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and we cover most of them now. Or send an email to hello@thesencast.com. The Sendcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and we help to show the small steps of progress pupils at SEND make. And we help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have frameworks that go from birth all the way through to 25. We have our early steps for early years, which breaks that birth to 3 years into smaller levels, so we can show those tiny steps of progress. And we have them for primary and secondary, so supporting all learners. Visit the B School website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me so I can take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sendcast. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye.
Right.